Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of Science World's online family event series, where we'll be taking a closer look at science in our backyards and communities for the upcoming season as we launch into the opening of our new feature exhibition here at Science World, Backyard Adventures, which is opening this upcoming month. My name is Dana. I'm the curator for Backyard Adventures feature exhibition here at Science World. And today I'm also joined by our behind the scenes technician, Madeline, who will make sure that everything is running smoothly for today's event. Before we start on today's adventure, I'd like to take a moment to gratefully acknowledge that we are on the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and that we would like to pay our respect to Indigenous elders, past, present, and emerging, as we work toward helping others to deepen their own connection and relationship with nature and the communities that they are a part of. Well, without further ado, I think that we are ready to go on today's adventure. So I am going to introduce our featured guests for today, Jannelle and Tenne. They are joining us from the Invasive Species Council of British Columbia. Welcome, Tenne. Welcome, Jannelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Science World, for inviting us to present here tonight. My name is Tenne Andersen, and I'm presenting today with Jannelle Bode. We are Japanese beetle ambassadors at the Invasive Species Council of BC. Like Dana just mentioned, if you would like, you can enter the location that you're calling in from today. You can also feel free to enter any questions that you might have into the chat as we go, and one of us will answer you in the chat as well. Those of you joining may be residing on other territories, but Jannelle and I are presenting from our homes in Vancouver, BC. This is the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. We will also have a Kahoot poll question. We will have 4 at the end of the presentation, so make sure that you're listening very closely to get all the answers right. The Japanese beetle eradication program would not be where it is today without the partnership and efforts between these organizations. These organizations that you see on the screen partnered together in 2018 and decided to eradicate the Japanese beetle. And by eradication, we mean completely getting rid of all individuals in Vancouver, but not the ones that live in their native habitat. So all Japanese beetles that live in Vancouver. Thanks to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the province of BC, the city of Vancouver, the Vancouver Parks Board, and the BC Landscape and Nursery and Association for your work. In our presentation, we will be doing an introduction to invasive species. We're going to do a treasure hunt about how invasive species spread. We're going to go over Japanese beetle biology and life cycle, which is a new invasive species that's present in Vancouver that you might have heard about if you live in the area. We're going to look at the damage that it causes and how it spreads, details of the eradication effort and the treatment strategy, and the movement restricted area that has been established. We will discuss results and successes of the program so far and what you can do to help at home. At the end of the presentation, we're going to quickly go over some new insect invaders that you can be on the lookout for around Vancouver. So I'm going to start with a few definitions. Native species are species that have lived and evolved in a given place for a long time and have adapted to local conditions and co-evolved with other species, predators, diseases, and climate factors. Non-native species were introduced to new ecosystems, so they have not evolved to be controlled by natural predators and diseases. Not all non-native species are invasive. Invasive species are non-native organisms that cause economic, social, and environmental harm and can spread quickly to new areas. Some invasive species have been regulated by law as noxious weeds, which are non-native plants that can be highly destructive, competitive, and very difficult to control. Some animals that we like to keep as pets can become invasive if we release them into the wild. Goldfish, rabbits, turtles, and lots of other animals can become invasive this way. The picture on the left is a European rabbit. European rabbits are native to Europe and Northern Africa, but they've been introduced to every continent in the world except Antarctica. People have kept rabbits as pets, but then released them into the wild, where they've been able to spread easily and effectively. They've now established in southern Vancouver Island, Triangle Island, and in isolated patches all around the Lower Mainland. So, what makes a species invasive? Invasive species are very good seed and offspring producers, with some producing thousands of seeds or offspring per individual. The offspring, seeds, or parts can spread easily and effectively, and populations establish quickly and thrive in disturbed areas such as burn zones after fires or the sides of highways. They also lack the natural diseases and predators from their native regions. For example, as you can see in this picture, the spotted knapweed has completely overtaken this field. Spotted knapweed is native to Central Europe and Russia. It reduces native plant and animal biodiversity and destroys soil and water resources by increasing erosion. Spotted knapweed reproduces by seed, and plants are capable of reproducing 500 to 4,000 seeds per square foot per year. These seeds can remain viable for up to 5 to 8 years. So you can see how invasive species are strong competitors of native species in an area where they're present. Here are some invasive species that you might see in your backyard. Common tansy has yellow, flat-topped, round flowers that grow in clusters. You might find it in pastures or in your driveway. Orange hawkweed has bright orange-red flowers clustered at the top. You might see it growing in the grass in the yard. American bullfrog is a very large frog that likes to live in koi ponds, canals, and ditches with water in them. Black slugs like to eat all sorts of plants. You might find them crawling along paths and hiding in tall grass and plants. Banded wood snails are yellowish and have a dark swirl on their shell. You can find them on the sidewalk and in the yard after it rains. You might see eastern gray squirrels up in the trees or raiding your bird feeder. They're brown and gray and have very bushy tails. Red-eared slider turtles are an invasive species that people sometimes keep as pets. They have red stripes on their head, and you might see them in ponds or swamps or sitting on logs in the sun. So now we're going to do a treasure hunt right in your own house. We're going to show a clue on the screen, and you'll get 1 minute to go and find the item. Once you find something, you can bring it back to your computer and type into the chat what the item is that you found. So the first thing that we're going to find is something that has traveled a long distance to get to your house. This could be fruit from a faraway country, or something that came in the mail from far away, or even something that you bought on a trip or vacation. So everyone is going to have 1 minute to go and find something around their house that meets this clue. So something that I found in my house that has traveled a long way is this lemon. Lemons come from really far away to where I live in Canada, and so this had to be shipped in a plane or in a boat or on a truck from far away to get to my house. Here is another thing that can travel long distances. This is a boat. So a boat can bring invasive species from one island to the next island, or even from across continents. And this is something that has traveled a long distance to get to my house. So if everyone can find some things that they have traveled a long way to get to their house and put them in the chat. So we're just going to give you guys a few more seconds to find something. This can be a piece of fruit or maybe a piece of mail that you got or something like that. Yes, books. That's very good. Books have traveled a long way to get to your house from somewhere else. And invasive species can be hiding in those books, and you wouldn't even know that they came from a far way away. So invasive species often come from far away. They can be hiding in fruit or in shipments from planes and trains and boats. And Canada has people called agriculture inspectors that help prevent invasive species from entering at Canada's borders.
Okay, so we are going to do the second item. So we are going to ask you to find something that you use for transportation. So this could be a pair of shoes or a bike, or maybe you have a toy car or an ATV that would represent the real thing. So we're going to give you 1 minute to go and find this item. So I have a couple things here that I use for transportation. So we have a bike wheel. So this is something that we use on our bikes. I took it off the bike to be able to show the bike wheel. And yeah, I love biking around Vancouver and going out into the Fraser Valley and sometimes biking up mountains, but that's pretty hard. Yeah, and something else that I have that I use for transportation is a pair of shoes. So I see that someone in the chat also has a pair of shoes. So this is a good way to get around. So you also might think of a car that's maybe parked in your driveway, or maybe you have a bike in your garage, or even if you take the bus to school or to work, that could be something that we use for transportation. So I'm going to give you guys a few more seconds here to find things that you use for transportation. Okay, so what did everybody find? Type it in the chat. Did anybody bring back a pair of shoes? So look at the bottom of your shoes. Does anybody see places where mud and seeds could get stuck? So my pair of shoes has some mud and seeds stuck in there. So your shoes are a place where invasive species can get transported to new areas. So ATV tires, car tires, and bike tires are all places where invasive species can get stuck. Cleaning your shoes and tires after you've had a fun day outside is a good way to stop the spread of invasive species.
So the next thing that we're going to find is something fuzzy. This could be a sweater or a piece of clothing or a fluffy pet or maybe a toy. So we're going to give you guys 1 minute to go and find something that's fuzzy. Something that I found in my house that's fuzzy is this sweater. So as you can see, it's really fuzzy and warm and soft, but that means that things can get stuck to it really easily. So this is one thing that I found that's fuzzy. And another thing I found that's fuzzy is this. So this is a stuffy monkey named Chesterman, and he lives in my house, but sometimes when he goes outside, he can get little things stuck to his fur as well. So this is something that I've found that's fuzzy in my house. I see some of you have found a sweater and a blanket, and those are really good things that are fuzzy and can get things stuck to them as well. And we're just going to give everyone a few more seconds to find something in their house that's fuzzy. Even my hair can be something that's fuzzy that can get things stuck to it too. So if anyone has long hair, that's something that you can find too for the treasure hunt. So fuzzy things that are like sweaters and pets and other clothing pieces or Velcro can carry invasive species seeds and parts from one place to another. This is because the seeds can stick to fuzzy things very well and they can go with you wherever you go. So a good way to make sure that you're not bringing invasive species seeds or parts is by brushing off your pets and your clothes after you take them outside.
Okay, so this is the last thing that we're going to be finding on our treasure hunt. So we're asking you to find something that gets wet. So you might find a toy boat, or you might find a rubber duck, or maybe an umbrella, or a raincoat. So I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to go and find something that can get wet, and then type it in the chat what you found. So I have a couple of things that I brought that can get wet. So I have a pink raincoat that can get wet in the rain. And I have my hood here to keep my head dry, but the hood gets wet. And then I also have a kayak paddle. So I see someone else has stand-up paddle boards. So this kayak paddle we use with a kayak when we're out in the water in different rivers and lakes and the ocean around here. So this is also something that can get wet. And some of you might have canoes or kayaks at home, or maybe you have a boat parked in your driveway or somewhere else, or maybe you have a pair of rubber boots. So I'd love to see all the ideas that you have in the chat. So I'll give you just a few more seconds. Okay, so I see some stand-up paddle boards and other boards. So things that get wet, like boats, canoes, and kayaks, are a way that invasive species can be transported from one lake to another lake, or from a lake to a river. So there's a few species of invasive mussels, algae, and others that can get stuck in boats, motors, and paddles. So the best way to prevent the spread of these invasive species that are in the water is to clean your boat, to drain all the water out of it, and to dry it before taking it to a new lake or river.
The Japanese beetle, whose Latin name is Popillia japonica, is native to the islands of Japan. It was first discovered in North America in 1916 in New Jersey. And from there, it hitched a ride on a tourist's car in 1939 and ended up in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. It has established now in Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, and many eastern states. And as of now, Japanese beetles are a regulated plant pest in Canada and the USA. BC has been designated as a pest-free quarantine area by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and we want to keep it this way. Because of the natural predators in Japan, the Japanese beetle does not occur in high numbers in its home range. These natural predators, though, are not present in Canada, which allows Japanese beetles to rapidly expand in numbers and range if they're left unchecked. The Japanese beetle was discovered in BC for the first time in Vancouver in 2017, near the False Creek area. It was detected as a part of a regular surveillance by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and after detection, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency did a delimitation survey and found the center of the infestation to be at David Lamb Park. So why are we putting all of this effort into preventing the Japanese beetle from establishing in Vancouver? The Japanese beetle feeds on over 300 species of agricultural and horticultural plants, including roses and hibiscus, apples, plums, beans, and peaches. So as you can probably tell, the implications of the Japanese beetle becoming established in BC are quite serious. Beetles prefer to feed on plants directly in the sun, beginning at the top and working their way downwards. They attack plants by eating the soft tissue between the leaf veins, leaving behind a lacy-looking pattern. This is called skeletonizing the leaf. Because of BC's many high-value agricultural and horticultural plants, we want to keep BC Japanese beetle free to prevent higher costs in the future. Adult beetles are most active on sunny days when the temperature is between 21 and 35 degrees Celsius and the relative humidity is above 60%. Most beetles fly short distances, but they can fly 8 kilometers in the wind. Most of the time they fly aimlessly, except when they're following the smell of something that they like flowers or other beetles. Adult Japanese beetles lay their eggs in the turf grass in the summer. A female will lay up to 60 eggs about 8 centimeters deep in the soil of lawns of grassy areas. Eggs will hatch 2 weeks later, and larvae will overwinter in the soil. That means sleep over the wintertime underneath the ground. When in the soil, larvae will eat the roots of the grass, which can cause the grass to die and peel back very easily. This can be bad for parks and golf courses and lawns because it leaves behind large patches of dead grass on the fields. Japanese beetles are excellent hitchhikers. They've been transported in plant parts, soil, in vegetables, and in vehicles. This is one of the reasons why the movement restricted area has been established in Vancouver, as we will discuss later. Luckily for us, the Japanese beetle is distinct among other beetles in BC. An adult Japanese beetle is oval-shaped, about 10 millimeters long and 6 millimeters wide, and the abdomen, thorax, and head are all metallic green. They also have metallic brown copper wing covers. There are 6 tufts of hair along each side and rear of the abdomen, and these white tufts of hair are distinct among any other beetle in BC, so they can be very good for identification. This is a diagram showing the Japanese beetle's life cycle. A life cycle is the stages of the beetle's life from the start when it's an egg to the finish when it's an adult. Adult beetles live for 3 to 4 weeks in the summer, and during that time they lay eggs in the turf grass. The eggs hatch after several weeks and they emerge as larvae. The Japanese beetle larvae have 3 instar stages, which are larval stages where they get bigger and bigger. After the larvae emerge, they burrow down in the soil to sleep over the wintertime, and they feed on roots of the turf grass to get bigger. Japanese beetles usually overwinter on the 3rd instar stage when they're the biggest. In the spring and summer, larvae will pupate, which means they will transition from a larvae to an adult, spend 2 weeks in the soil resting, and then emerge as adults when it's warm enough. Adult beetles are in flight in Vancouver from June 15th to October 15th, so all summer long. Here are some insects that are often mistaken for the Japanese beetle. Of the 10 that are pictured in this slide, the European brown chafer, which is that first one on the far left, the viburnum leaf beetle, and the brown marmorated stink bug are invasive. The rest are native to BC and are not of concern. Jannelle will now be taking over, and she's going to talk to you about the eradication plan, the results, and other invasive insects that you can be on the lookout for in your backyard.
Hi, everyone. So after the Japanese beetle was discovered in 2017, all of the organizations that Tenne talked about met and decided to pursue eradication of the Japanese beetle in Vancouver. So this means that they decided to get rid of all of the beetles in Vancouver, just the Japanese beetles. So getting rid of all the Japanese beetles in Vancouver is usually pretty expensive and is usually only possible right at the beginning after you find the Japanese beetle. So it's really important to get rid of the Japanese beetle in Vancouver because it can cause millions of dollars of damage in farmers' crops. So we get rid of the Japanese beetle in Vancouver by trapping, spraying, by establishing a movement control area and public outreach. So on the left side of your slide, you can see a photo, and this is a photo of a sign that's posted at the entrance and the exit of the movement restricted area in Vancouver. There are these signs posted on lots of the major roadways in and out of the movement restricted area to let people know if they're entering or leaving. So next time you're driving around Vancouver, you can be on the lookout for some of these signs. So this is a photo of a Japanese beetle trap on the right side of your slide. You might see these while out in Vancouver. They're placed all over the lower mainland from Whistler to Hope and along the Sunshine Coast to figure out where the Japanese beetles are. So traps are really important to monitor where the Japanese beetles are and to see how they're spreading over time. So traps are also placed at places where there might be new Japanese beetles introduced, like at airports and at railroad stations. And the trap has the scent of a Japanese beetle and also a roe scent in it to make the Japanese beetles want to fly into the trap. So the Japanese beetles fly into the trap at the top part. You might see there's 4 wings, and then they get trapped in the cylinder part at the bottom. And inspectors come around on a regular basis to look in the traps and see if there are any Japanese beetles in them. And if you're out in Vancouver on a walk or an adventure and you happen to see one of these traps, we would just ask that you leave it alone so that the inspectors can do their jobs and check the traps. So Japanese beetles are sprayed with 2 different pesticides. They're sprayed with acelepryn and beetle gone. So acelepryn is used on the larvae when they're in the soil, and beetle gone is used on the adults. And these are both safe for other plants and animals. And these are only applied by trained and licensed pesticide applicators. So this spraying is done by the city of Vancouver. And you can see in the map on the left, there are some blue areas on the screen. So these are the treatment areas for this year. And within these areas, all the grass on public property is sprayed with acelepryn, and beetle gone is used if there's some of those skeletonized leaves noticed. So a movement restricted area was established to prevent the movement of soil and plants out of the restricted area. So from June 15 to October 15 each year, movement of above ground plant parts and soil out of the restricted area is prohibited. And soil cannot be moved year round. This is because beetle eggs and beetle larvae can always be hiding in soil. So we want to stop any new larvae from being transported out of the restricted area. So if you're a landscaper listening to this call, the city of Vancouver has set up a temporary transfer station at 301 West 1st Avenue in Vancouver. And landscapers can bring excess soil and plants to this station, and they'll be disposed of in a way that prevents the spread of Japanese beetles. So in this map on the right side of your screen, you can see the movement restricted area in red. So plants and soil cannot be moved out of this regulated area from June 15 to October 15, and soil cannot be moved year round. And if soil or plants need to be moved, you need to get a movement certificate from the CFIA. And the purpose of this movement restricted area is to prevent any larvae from being transported in soil, or any adult beetles from hitching a ride on plants and being transported to a new location. We really want to keep the Japanese beetle just in this one area in Vancouver so that it's easier to get rid of. This graph shows the number of traps set out each year and the number of beetles caught each year since the first beetle was caught in 2017. So you can see the orange line on your graph. That's the number of Japanese beetles caught each year. And the blue line is the number of traps that the CFIA has put out. So you may notice that the orange line has a huge spike in 2018, where there was over 8,000 beetles caught in Vancouver. So this was because these beetles were caught before the spraying of acelepryn had started. So after the treatment has been done, in 2019 and 2020, there has been an approximate 82% drop in the number of beetles caught. And this is really good news because it means that the treatment is working. So last year in 2020, there were 214 beetles caught. And this year, the trapping results will be available online after the season is over. So after listening to all this information about Japanese beetles, you might be wondering what you can do to help. So the best way to help is to report any beetles that you think might be Japanese beetles. So you can report this to the CFIA or to BC Invasives. So the CFIA contact information is on the screen. There's an email address and a website and a phone number that you can contact to report any Japanese beetles. And you can also report it on the BC Invasives website. And we actually have an app that you can report invasive species on as well. So The app is just the logo that you see on the screen. And I actually have it on my phone here, and you can see it's this app right here. So in this app, you can take a photo, say where you found the suspect beetle, and report it to the authorities. And another way you can help is by respecting the plant and soil movement restrictions. And another great way to help is to tell your family and friends about the Japanese beetle in Vancouver. So now I'm going to move on and talk about one more invasive insect that you might have seen on the news, or maybe you've seen one of these around Vancouver. So this is the Asian giant hornet. Its Latin name is Vespa mandarinia. This is the largest hornet in the world, and they can be up to 5 centimeters long, which is about this long. So that's a pretty big hornet. They have a shield-shaped head and are orange and black. So other wasps that you might see around Vancouver are usually yellow and black instead of orange and black. So it's really important to prevent the establishment of this hornet in BC and also Washington, because it can have really negative impacts on the environment, economy, and public health. So these were first seen in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island in August 2019, where a nest was located and destroyed. In 2020, there were 6 other hornets that were found in the Fraser Valley from White Rock to Aldergrove. And there's been no more hornets that have been found on Vancouver Island. And last year in 2020, there was a nest found in Washington State just over the border, and it was destroyed. And this year, just this past week, there was another nest found and destroyed in Washington, also just over the border. So it's really important to be on the lookout for these. And we are also just asking that people do not use the term murder hornet. So you might see some news articles calling it a murder hornet, because all insects have a role to play in the environment. And this Asian giant hornet is not out to murder people. It's just in the environment playing its role, but we just don't want it to be here in BC. So like I said before, Asian giant hornets are not interested in humans, pets, or animals. They'll only attack if their nest is disturbed. And Asian giant hornets can be really bad for honeybees and other insects because they feed on them, and they can destroy a whole colony of honeybees in just a few hours. So here are some insects that you might see while out in Vancouver looking for Asian giant hornets. So you might see a bald-faced hornet, a yellow jacket wasp, a horntail wasp, or an elm sawfly. So if you look at the horntail wasp, there's a really big tail on it, and you might think that's a big stinger, but it's not. It's called an ovipositor, and it's for laying eggs in the wood. And these insects are all native to BC. So just like the Japanese beetle, a big part of managing Asian giant hornets is public help in reporting sightings. And these are links on the screen where you can report possible sightings. And you can also use the Invasive Species app that I showed before. So now we're going to go into the Kahoot game that we talked about. So everybody get ready to play Kahoot. And we can, if you also don't have the link available, you can also just play along at home.
All right, everyone. So is everyone ready for our first question? So, what is one way that an invasive species can get to a new place? On your shoes, on a boat, on a dog's fur, or all of these ways? So make sure that you click the answer that you think it is. All right. Yep, so it's actually all of these ways. They can travel on shoes, on a boat, and on a dog's fur. So you guys were all right. And don't forget that they can also be on boats as well. All right, what is the best way to identify a Japanese beetle? So one of these is true and the rest of them are not true. So it's all yellow, it has big white stripes, it can't fly, or it has 6 tufts of white hair on either side of the abdomen. So what is the best way to identify a Japanese beetle? Yes, you guys are right. It is the 6 tufts of white hair on either side of the abdomen. That is distinct among every other beetle in BC.
Okay, our next question is, when can you move soil out of the restricted area? Is it always, in the summer, in the winter, or never? Awesome. So a couple of you got it right. So the answer is never. So if you live inside that red area that we showed on the map, you can never move soil from within the area to out of the area. And this is because larvae can always be hiding in the soil. Okay, let's move on to our last question. So what is the prey of Asian giant hornets? So what do Asian giant hornets eat? Is it plants, humans, honeybees and other insects, or mammals? Awesome, you guys nailed it. So Asian giant hornets only eat honeybees and other insects. So we just have a couple things just to quickly wrap up our presentation. So here at the Invasive Species Council, we have a few other programs that you can be a part of to help prevent the spread of invasive species. And you can also sign up for the newsletter at bcinvasives.ca. So thank you all so much for participating in our presentation tonight. You are now all Japanese beetle detectives, and you can help us be on the lookout for Japanese beetles. If you have any other follow-up questions for us, our email addresses are on the screen, and we'd love to hear from you.
I was going to say, thanks, Jannelle. Thanks, Tenne. A little bit of technical difficulties there on our end, but we figured it out. Audience, you are all winners today just by coming out to this session. You've all done well at learning a little bit more about invasive species, which means that we are one step closer to having everybody help us out and help keep all of our community a better place to live in. I wanted to say a special thank you again to Jannelle and Tenne for joining us today, and to you, audience, for joining us today, as well as for Madeline behind the scenes, keeping everything up and running smoothly on our end here. As Tenne and Jannelle mentioned, audience, you can contact them. Their emails are still there on the screen if you have any more questions about invasive species that you'd like have answered. Madeline's also popping a link into the chat there about how you can find out more about invasive species on the Invasive Species Council of British Columbia's website. And if you would like to find out more about other things in our backyard and communities that scientists are up to, that people are up to, science that everyday humans are doing as well, we'd love to see you at another one of our backyard adventures events. These are going to be running monthly from now all the way until the new year, in line with our Backyard Adventures feature exhibition that's opening next month. All right, thank you everyone again for joining us today. We hope to see you at another event. Bye.